Hello everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, just setting up a few things and then we'll be good to go, right? Okay. Hi. Thank you for joining us. So happy to see. I'm seeing some people here that I haven't seen in a long while. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so we're both on Facebook and on Instagram, right? So you can join on either one. You can invite your friends to also join up with what we're doing. After now, we will post it on YouTube, so you can just go to my YouTube channel and watch what we are posting there. Also, the sessions before now, I mean, we've done this every week for quite a few weeks now. All the sessions are also there, so you can always join us. Okay, great. So thank you. Fantastic. All right, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. It's morning where I am, so if you're around me, good morning is in order. I don't believe I'll be saying good night to anyone because I don't think that anyone from New Zealand or Australia is watching right now. Okay. So last week we did a bit of teaching on seasons. It was actually the part 2 for the whole of this month. We've been teaching on seasons, and we took time to talk about the differences between so we took time to talk about how time is defined, especially in the New Testament. How on the one hand you can call it chronos, which is chronology, right? 10 a.m. goes after 9 a.m. and then 11 a.m. goes after 10 a.m. And on like that, right? But then we also talked about the kairos. Kairos is another word for time in Greek, and that one means significance, the significance of a particular time, right? Which is pretty much what we call seasons. So yes, it's 10 a.m. where I am, and some other people are here and they will say yes, it's 10 a.m. 18th of July 2020, and if you reside where I reside, then it means that all of us have the same time, same date, but we don't all have the same meaning to that time, right? So while the chronos may look the same to all of us, the kairos is different from person to person, largely depending on the events of your life and your ability to bring God into whatever situation you're going through, right? Yes, so this is very critical. So on that first day, we shared on the story of the man at the pool of Bethsaida or Bethesda, whichever one you are more comfortable with. And the interesting thing about the man's story was he had a lot of chronos that he had spent at that pool. He had just been waiting there. he didn't quite get what he was looking for. The story had it that at every given time, an angel would come and would stir the waters, and whoever jumped in first to be healed. But in this case, this man wasn't healed, right? Because he was not able to get in there on time. And then a kairos moment happened for him. Jesus showed up on the scene and asked him, guy, did you want to be healed, right? And it was just a moment of favor for him, and he got what he wanted. And we prayed in that meeting, and I've received some testimonies about how God's favor just started shining on some people, and they were experiencing kairos, as it were. Last week we shared on the story of Hannah, who, I mean, it's a popular story. She was barren and was having a hard time. And then we remember that in the story, she went to the temple and prayed. And that was when she got a miracle. But then we shared some details about the prayer she said. How that many people would usually say that, oh, God answered that because some claim she prayed aloud, some claim that she cried, and all of that. And we were able to establish that our tears were not what moved God. Otherwise, all of us would have been able to effectively cry on God and then get what we want per time. Okay, it wasn't the tears, and indeed she wasn't even shouting because the Bible records that the priest was angry because he saw her lips moving and didn't hear a voice, so he felt she was drunk. So it wasn't that. What was significant about the prayer of Hannah was that she was able to engage God and strike a deal with him, right? And she kind of got God where it mattered, right? And that was very, very significant. The message for last week was basically that we must be able to find God's gain in what we're looking for, right? We must be able to give back to God while trying to take from him. He has a vested interest in everything he's giving to us, and we must be able to pick his own part in it. What is in it for God in what we're doing? It's the best way to strike a deal with him. He's not just going to give you what you want just to satisfy your longing. He always wants to use you and what you have to reach other people, right? And Hannah caught that significantly, and she was able to engage God and get what she wanted. So that was what we shared on last week. Of course, it's just snippets I'm giving. You can go on my YouTube page to see that. Today we're discussing the part 3 of this series. I titled this one, How to Wait. How to Wait. The truth is, all of us will wait for something. In fact, let me put it in a better way. All of us have waited for things. All of us will still wait for things. Many of us are waiting on God for some things at the moment, right? But there's a wisdom to it. Okay, it is very important that we learn how to wait such that when it's the season for what we want, we are able to step into it and pick what we need to pick at that time, right? Zechariah chapter 10 verse 1 says, and I'm paraphrasing it, it says, ask God for rain in the time of the latter rain. It said, and God will send flashing thunders and clouds and all of that. In other words, when you ask God for rain at the time of the latter rain, at the season for it, he said, when you ask God for it, it's not just going to send rain, it's going to send it in a big way, right? Yes, so that is significant. Okay, and then Galatians 6:9 says, let's not be weary in well doing. He said, for in due time we will reap if we do not faint. Okay, so that's what I want to share on today, right? So like I said last week, we talked about Hannah, the smart woman who influenced a season by making a trade with God, right? And this trade preserved Israel for generations to come and must have been a great relief to God. We did share how that Eli was his time was almost up, and his children were misbehaving, so they were not able to step into that role. So God needed somebody to step in there. Hannah needed a child, God needed a priest. And Hannah decided to tell God, we can make my child your priest, right? I'm going to give my child to you. The child will be trained in the temple, so the child will be pretty much prepared for priesthood. It was at this point God gave Hannah that child, and so even when Eli and his sons died, Israel was safe because Samuel grew up to become the prophet and the priest. He was the one that ordained Saul. He was the one that ordained David. And it was just that deal that woman was able to strike with God in that moment. Okay, so the Bible clearly states that there are times and seasons for everything. You see that in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, from verse 1, it says, to everything there's a time and a season for everything under the earth. And Genesis 8:22, God said, as long as the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, he said, those will not cease, okay? So they will always come, one after the other. And that's the way the seasons of our lives come. There are times when it feels like things are moving very fast, and there are times when it looks like things are slowing down. All of this are seasons, and all of them have their advantages for us if we know how to work them. Okay, so there are some things we may just need to wait for. So we shared about Hannah last week, but then she did wait, and it was in the process of waiting, I believe, that she caught the revelation to strike the kind of deal she struck with God, because Bible records that she had been going to the temple every year and praying. So it was in the process of waiting that she hit that. The man at the pool of Bethesda had waited for a long time. We claim the faith of Abraham, but he waited also, right? So usually you would wait. I did share in one sermon how that Jesus at age 12 could not wait to be about his father's business, but at age 30, when they told him, come and work a miracle, he said, my time has not come. Because he had waited 18 years, right? He had waited 18 years, and a lot of maturing came within that period, right? So waiting is a fundamental principle for a Christian, okay? Is part of the package of faith, right? So there are certain things we must wait for. Unfortunately, you have no say in it. When you have to wait for something, you have to wait for it. The only choice you have is to wait properly or not, which then has its consequences. Okay, so there are some things that just must take their due course, and you cannot rush them. So it was the billionaire Warren Buffett that said, when he was still teaching on the principle of waiting, and he said, you cannot produce a baby in 1 month by getting 9 women pregnant, right? That all of them should just do 1 month and add it together. He said, no, it won't work like that. What you're going to have is 9 babies in 9 months. Okay, all of them will go through the 9 months and then come out, and then you have 9 babies when you're looking for one. You cannot. All you can do is wait for 9 months. And in those 9 months, there are many things you can do. There are many ways you can prepare for the arrival of that child. There are many things you can do within those periods. So what we have learned to do is, yes, it's 9 months. It's going to take 9 months. The baby is going to come. Let's just make sure that by the time this child comes, the child is coming into something beautiful. That's what we spend the 9 months doing. If the average woman had a choice, they would have the baby immediately. right? But now we all understand that when you have that child immediately, you won't like what you give birth to. So while you allow that child to mature, you yourself are preparing and waiting properly for God to do what he wants to do. All right? So, how do you wait properly? Farmers are some of the people that usually understand this thing the most, because their productivity depends almost totally on seasons. They understand that they have to study the seasons to know what to do or plant in each season. For them, productivity comes when they are able to cooperate with the seasons and know the kind of crops that thrive best in each season. Okay, they know this kind of crops are best planted in rainy season. This kind are best planted in dry season. This kind are best planted in spring. They know. And they must know. Otherwise, they'll be broke. They know this. So, some of them then pick, if for instance, my major produce does not grow in summer, and this is summer, then what I do is find other ventures, right? Maybe some other hobbies, maybe some other jobs, whatever it is that I can find to do at that time. And some others will just rather focus on preserving and then distributing whatever they got from the last harvest, right? The fact is that life is characterized by seasons, and some seasons may not necessarily favor us. We have to know this clearly. Some of the seasons will not favor us. It's a fact of life. Okay, so what do we do while we are waiting for our season? Number one, keep praying. Keep praying. It's the first thing you do. And I didn't just say pray. I said keep praying. Okay, somebody said, if you only pray when you are in trouble, then you are in trouble. Okay, to pray consistently is a smart move for a Christian. Okay, so the Bible encourages us to pray without ceasing. That's in 1 Thessalonians 5:17. And as we shared last week, one of the things we said last week was that praying consistently helps you function on God's frequency. When you talk to me often, over time, you begin to reason like me. That's why the Bible says, do not be deceived. Evil communication corrupts good manners, right? You will not relate with me consistently and not begin to think like me, get my attitude and my response to situations. That's why sometimes they say to you that it's better when you are with a multi-billionaire and all of that, it's better you're not asking for money, but asking for access. Just so that after a while, you can begin to process things like them and begin to achieve things like they do. Okay? So, praying helps you to function on God's frequency. When you talk to God and you hear from Him, it's perfect. Little by little, your perspective begins to change, and we'll get to that point shortly. Okay? So it usually helps you to see things more deeply than the average person sees them. So when Zechariah advises us to ask God for rain in the time of the latter rain, like we read in Zechariah chapter 10, you may wonder why we still need to ask Him if it's already time for the rain. If it's the time of the latter rain, why do I still need to ask God for rain? And we'll come to that again shortly. But I think that the big issue here is how to even recognize that it's time for it. How did Hannah recognize at that time? Because even Eli did not know that God was going to stop dealing with him. Eli did not know that his children were going to die for what they were doing. No one in Israel knew that God needed to replace that family. Even Hannah did not know what God needed a child for. She probably didn't even know that God needed a child. But she just got to that frequency. Because before then, we had never heard of someone that would trade with God like that. But she got on that frequency. And like we said last week, that's how the Holy Spirit guides you when you are in tune with God. Maybe some of us here have prayed sometimes and you're wondering while praying, where did those words come from? Yes, it is by continually praying and engaging God, you get to certain realms, okay? So, sometimes we've prayed about something and prayed repeatedly, and these things have not happened, but you just feel a release. You feel this is settled. You feel the clouds are full. Like Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11 says, that when the clouds are full, they empty themselves on the earth, right? And that feeling comes from a certain level of consciousness. It's not physical. It is when you connect with God in another realm, and then you experience the peace in this realm, okay? So, sometimes we need to push through in the spirit realm, right? You need to keep pushing, which is why praying consistently is important. Now, some of us might have noticed this. It happens from time to time. So sometimes you're traveling from one city to another. It's a straight flight. And going to that city, it's 2 hours. The flight is 2 hours. Coming back, the flight is 3 hours. No stopovers. Same distance, supposedly. But the length of that trip then becomes different. Why? Because the first time you were going, you were probably flying in the direction of the wind. And so you are faster. When you're coming, you are probably traveling against the wind. It makes you slower and it requires more effort to get to where you're going. It is normal. So sometimes what you are looking for is going against the wind. You want to pray about it. You want to push. You want to, how do I explain this? Okay, so one nice explanation I'll give. You are trusting God for something and you are praying about it. You are really praying about it. I'm trying to simplify this now. And the more you pray about it, the more you have certain encounters. You meet certain people. They teach you certain things. It is still your prayer that is getting answered before the ultimate one comes. But what you realize at the end of it all is that all of these things that happened in between, all of these people you met, all of these skills you learned, help you to use that thing you were asking for. So it's because you were not really prepared for what you were looking for. And God was probably answering you in bits, as it were. And this thing has happened to many people that I know. It is when you are traveling against the wind, pushing when everything around you is not going in that direction. To continually pray is a wise thing. Okay? And this is why Jesus taught us to keep on asking, keep on seeking, keep on knocking. Okay? And so in that story that he told, when he said, keep on knocking, he told a story of a friend. It's in Matthew 7, it's in Luke 12 as well. A friend that went to knock on another friend's door to say, give me stuff, I have a guest. And that one said, you know what, I can't do this. I'm tucked in for the night. And he said, but because you won't stop knocking, right? So sometimes a friend has stood up and he has taken one step, he has taken another step. Your prayer is getting answered, but it's not fully answered yet. You stop at that point, the friend jumps back, right? Life can be like that, all right? So it is important that we keep on praying. Another big advantage of prayer is found in Philippians chapter 4. verses 6 and 7, where he said, be anxious for nothing, but in all things with prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving as well. He said, make your requests known to God. And then he said, the peace of God that surpasses all understanding shall guard your heart and mind. Now, Paul explained there that the effect of praying is some unexplainable peace. You just lose the capacity to worry about that thing at that time because you have handed it over to someone superior. Okay? So, it's the first thing that God gives to you when you seek him on an issue. So in the story of Hannah that we read last week, when she got to that point, the Bible says that after she and Eli spoke and Eli said, may God grant your petition and all of that, the Bible says that Hannah got up, she went to eat and she was happy. But she didn't have a child yet. But she got to that point of rest. It's the first thing God gives to you. And when you pray consistently, it keeps your heart at ease. All right. Okay. Sorry, we're back now. It appeared that I had a little problem with the internet on this side. Sorry about that. Okay. For people joining on Facebook, we are still struggling to connect back there. So, but we're still trying to fix that. All right. But we'll go on for now. Okay. So, sometimes God does not answer your prayer immediately, but you feel a lift in your soul and a smile breaks out on your face. Not because the prayer has been answered, but because you feel you have been heard. And between when you have been heard and when it has happened is the time of waiting. So, prayer is important. If you're waiting on God for something, then you must continue to pray till you feel the peace. And even after you feel the peace, continually engaging with God is a wise move. You have to keep engaging with him. There are times when, in my years of counseling, I've talked with people, and there are times I've realized that what this person needs is not money, it's wisdom. What this person needs is not power, is certain realignments, right? And that's it. So sometimes you are praying to God, which is why we strongly recommend praying in the Holy Spirit as well, because on that plane, he knows the mind of God, and he knows your mind, and kind of balances it, right? That's why we encourage you to pray in the Spirit, because eventually you would realize that you are starting to pray for what you need more than what you want. So prayer is very, very critical while waiting. The second one is to gain perspective. So I said the first thing you must do while waiting is pray. The second thing you must do is gain perspective. So Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 1, he said, who is like a wise man and who knows the interpretation of a thing? He said a man's wisdom makes his face shine, and the sternness of his face is removed. In other words, when three of us are facing the same problem and one of us is smiling while the other two are freaking out, then the two of us will look at that one that is smiling and ask, is there something you know that we don't know? Because obviously that reaction is a product of certain levels of knowledge. Okay, so that person is interpreting things differently from the rest of us. And life is all about interpretation. So while you are waiting for that thing, gain perspective. The waiting period puts a lot of pressure on the mind. And it's one of the reasons I so much respect what Abraham did when God asked him to sacrifice Isaac. God told him to go on a 3-day journey. I mean, it would have been a lot easier if God said, put a gun to his head and shoot him in an instant, right? That would probably be a bit easier because you won't think, you just do it and then deal with the consequences. But God gave him 3 full days to take the guy to the destination, which means he had 72 hours to think about what God was asking him to do. 72 hours to change his mind. 72 hours to respond to Isaac's questions. And I think that was the biggest deal. The fact that for those 72 hours, he did not change his mind. That was very, very significant. And I believe God respected that. The waiting period puts a lot of pressure on the mind. And you can't believe the suggestions that will come to your mind while you're waiting. It is one of the reasons we are not allowed to judge as Christians, because that trouble, that turmoil is in my mind. You can't see it. So you can never have adequate information to judge me with. Okay? So, there's a lot of pressure on the mind. Because while there's no external movement, your situation is not changing. You're not seeing progress there, but there's a lot of movement internally. A lot of things are going on. So you see someone sitting in front of you and the mind is in another country. So a lot of things happen at that time. Okay? And the major thing about waiting for a season is the chance it gives you to find different perspectives to the situation. Is a critical thing about it. It's the reason why some people say, you know what, it's not worth it. I'm going to do as I like. I'm done waiting. Because a lot of thoughts come to your mind, and like Job's wife, someone comes to ask you, are you still holding on to your faith? Curse God. Yeah, I mean, it was funny. Curse God and die. Looking at it, you're wondering, why would you say curse God? What does that solve for you? But again, it's easy to say it on this side. The person in pain would usually react by transferring pain. And as far as she was concerned, pass this pain to God. Curse him. The worst that will happen is you die. She didn't just get up to do it. There was a lot of pressure on her mind at that time. Okay? So, you find different perspectives to the situation. And sometimes you find yourself going from hope to hopelessness, and then to anger, and then maybe to a little joy, and then to fear, and then to resignation. You just move here and there. Okay? There's a lot of pressure. And this is when your real stuff shows. This is where we see what is inside of you. The waiting period can feel like hot water sometimes, right? And then when you put the tea bag inside, what is inside it shows. When they say this is green tea, this is this color, you probably won't see it holding the bag until you put it in the hot water. What is inside there shows up. So, what's your real stuff? What books are you reading? Are you reading the Bible as well? What are you filling your mind with? Who are your companions? What do you say to yourself? Okay? These are the biggest shapers